There's another set of statements relating to DNA, which are also misleading. On April 10th, Mr. Nifong now, I believe from his testimony yesterday, acknowledges that he went to a meeting along with the other detectives and was told about this unidentified DNA. And he knew for a fact at that meeting by the 10th that there was unidentified DNA found on the rape kit that didn't match the players. The following day, he went to a forum in NCCU after having just received that knowledge and made a comment which said, if you don't find any DNA, I don't have the exact quote, but if you don't find any DNA, it doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means nothing was left behind. Well, they had just released a report from the FBI saying that there was no DNA. But he knows at this point that there is something left behind. In fact, there's lots of things left behind. And none of them match the players. And he's representing at a public forum that nothing has been left behind related to the DNA evidence. It's a misleading statement at best, and it's probably dishonest because he knows it. And he's admitted he was at that hearing in this case, in this testimony. He also made another series of statements regarding silence of the players, and those statements are also misleading. He said, after getting knowledge on the March 27th meeting, on March 27th, of course, he sat down with the initial officers and he got briefed. And one of the things that everyone seems to agree on about that meeting is that they covered the fact that the players, the three residents, had come in and they had given detailed written statements. And he refers to this as the stone wall of silence. And these are the detailed written statements that Mr. Nifong had access to. And his investigators told him that the defendants came in willingly and gave these statements. They provided names. They told everybody they could think of who was at the party. And then Mr. Nifong proceeds to go out and make these kinds of statements in the press, that they're acting under some kind of stone wall of silence and they're refusing to talk with investigators. And best of all, why are they so unwilling to tell us in their own words what happened here? That is a misleading statement at best when he knows that three of the players have come in and voluntarily cooperated. Mr. Chairman referred to the fact that there were comments about either a personal opinion or about the existence of a crime. And those comments, in light of what was existing and what Mr. Nifong was told, were also misleading. The first thing that he was told, in fact, according to Investigator Hyman, brought up in the initial meeting, was that the accusers had told many inconsistent stories. And we've seen the documentation showing that initially, when she was initially investigated, and then throughout the proceedings, she told inconsistent stories about what happened to her. And all of these things provide just an abundance of doubt about this question. You're not here to decide the question of whether or not it happened, but there is a lot of doubt in this case, at a minimum. And of course, according to the Attorney General, there isn't any doubt. But at the time he was making these statements, there was doubt. We know he received at some point prior to the indictment the accuser's psychological history. And Mr. Nifong continued to make pretrial statements. He may not have made as many after April 3rd, but he continued to make them. And he made statements about the fact that a crime had occurred at least as late as May 3rd after the election. And if you read his release to the press in June, as late as June. He also knew from the initial meeting that the players said that she was lying. And so, of course, that's one version of the event, but it certainly leads to doubt when they're all consistently saying she's lying and providing a version of events as no sexual assault occurred. He also knew that the police had investigated and talked with the only other person there with Miss Mangum, Miss Pittman, And her initial allegation was that the whole thing was a crock. When they sat down with her again several days later, she said other things that were completely inconsistent with the version, including the fact that she said Miss Mangum wanted to go back in the house right before they left, which is completely inconsistent. And although we're not going to impose on Mr. Nifong the responsibility at that early stage to resolve that kind of discrepancy, it certainly creates doubt that something happened if the only other person who was there who's not a suspect is calling it a crock and saying she wanted to go back in to the house before they left.